All right, ready for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling radiation.
Yeah, but not the kind you might be picturing.
No glowing mushroom clouds or anything like that.
Yeah.
We're focusing on something a bit more down to earth.
Literally down to earth.
Okay, so what kind of radiation are we talking about?
Well, we're going to be exploring the radiation we encounter every day here in India.
Everyday radiation in India.
Both indoors and outdoors, actually.
So you're telling me there's radiation just hanging out in my living room?
Pretty much, yeah. Most people don't realize they're constantly exposed to low levels of radiation.
But isn't radiation, like, you know, dangerous?
It can be in high doses, but the levels we're talking about are from natural sources.
Natural sources, so like what? Bananas?
Well, bananas do have a tiny bit of radiation, but there are bigger players.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What else is out there radiating away?
Things like cosmic rays from space, radioactive elements in the soil, even certain building materials.
Wow, so it's like an invisible force field surrounding us all the time.
Exactly. It's part of our natural environment. And that's why it's important to study radiation levels specifically in India.
Right, because what's considered normal background radiation might be different here than in other parts of the world.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we'll be focusing on a research article.
Okay, lay it on me. What's the title?
It's called Annual Effective Dose Equivalent of Population Staying in Industrial Area Bhilai, Chhattisgarh, India, estimated using gamma dose rate measurements.
Wow, that's a mouthful. I'm already feeling smarter just hearing that title.
It is a bit technical, but it gives you a good sense of what they were looking at.
So break it down for me. Where did this research take place?
They focused on Jamul, which is an industrial area in Bhilai, Chhattisgarh.
Chhattisgarh, got it. And what's special about this Jamul area?
Well, it's known for its cement industry, which is interesting because industrial processes can sometimes release low levels of radiation.
Makes sense. So did the researchers just like walk around Jamul with Geiger counters?
Not exactly. They had a more focused approach. They chose 50 houses in the area.
50 houses. Okay, and then what?
And they measured gamma radiation levels, both inside and outside of each house.
Hold on, gamma radiation. Why just gamma radiation?
Well, gamma radiation is a high-energy type of radiation. It can travel through walls, even our bodies.
Ah, so it gives a good indication of our overall radiation exposure.
Exactly. Now, their goal was to figure out how much radiation people in this area are exposed to every day.
Right, because we're all constantly bombarded with this stuff, even if we don't realize it.
Yeah. And this study area has a decent population size, about 25,878 people, I think.
Okay, so a decent sample size.
Yeah.
And they were looking at something called, what was it again? AED?
Yep, AED stands for Annual Effective Dose Equivalent.
AED. Okay, another technical term. I'm going to need you to explain that one.
Sure. Basically, AED measures the potential long-term biological impact of radiation on humans.
So, like, the chance of getting sick from radiation exposure?
Well, it's not quite as straightforward as that, but AEDE considers things like the type of radiation, the amount of exposure, and even how sensitive different parts of the body are to radiation.
Okay, so it takes into account a lot of variables. So, a higher AEDE would generally mean a greater risk.
Generally, yes, but it's also important to remember that even low levels of radiation can have some effect, and everybody's different.
Right, everyone's body reacts differently. So it's not just about getting a massive dose all at once, it's about the accumulation over time.
Exactly. It's the long game we're talking about here.
Okay, so we've got the background on AEE. Now the big question, what did the researchers find in those houses?
All right, well, buckle up because this is where things get interesting. The radiation levels weren't like alarmingly high or anything.
Okay, no need to evacuate just yet.
But there was this one finding that really caught our attention.
Ooh, I love a good scientific mystery.
Tell me more. They found that indoor gamma radiation levels were actually significantly higher than outdoor levels in this area.
Wait, really? But that doesn't make sense. Shouldn't we be exposed to more radiation outdoors? I mean, there's the sun, cosmic rays, all that stuff.
That's what makes this so fascinating, and this is where the Indian context becomes super important.
All right, I'm hooked. Tell me more about this indoor-outdoor radiation mystery. Okay, so we've got higher radiation levels inside than outside. How is that even possible?
Yeah, it's a bit counterintuitive, but
Mhm.
when they measured, they found an average indoor level of 191.7 ENS-VRR.
Okay, slow down there. ENS-VR. What's that all about?
Right, sorry. ENS-VRR stands for nanosieverts per hour.
Nanosieverts per hour. Help me out here.
Basically, it's a unit for measuring radiation exposure over time.
So the higher the number, the more radiation you're getting.
Yeah, exactly. And outdoors, they measured an average of 136.8 NSVR.
Still, it feels weird that it's higher indoors. Shouldn't our houses be protecting us?
You'd think so, right? But here's the thing. Building materials themselves can actually have a bit of radiation.
Hold on, are you saying my house is radioactive?
Well, not exactly radioactive like you see in the movie.
Okay, good. Because I'm not really into that whole glowing in the dark look.
Yeah, no worries there. It's more about naturally occurring radioactive elements.
Naturally occurring, so it's not like nuclear waste or anything.
Nope, nothing like that. It's more like certain types of rock or soil that naturally contain these radioactive elements.
Okay, so my house isn't going to turn into Chernobyl anytime soon. But still, why are these levels higher in India specifically? Is there something different about our building materials?
That's a great question. And India has so much diversity in its building materials, right? From traditional stuff to modern concrete buildings.
Right, we've got everything from mud huts to high-rise apartments.
Exactly. And the types of rock and soil used can vary a lot in how much natural radioactivity they have.
So what's normal in one part of India might be totally different somewhere else.
Exactly. And that's why studying radiation in India is so important.
Right, we can't just assume global averages will apply everywhere.
Exactly. Now, you mentioned different types of houses. It makes you wonder about those traditional houses, right?
Yeah, those ones made with mud and bamboo, for example, would they have different radiation levels compared to a concrete apartment building?
That's a fascinating thought, isn't it? We really need more research to understand how different building styles and materials play into all of this, especially in India, where there's such a range.
It really makes you see your house in a whole new light. But, okay, let's get back to this study. They were in an industrial area, right? And you mentioned those industries could also be releasing radiation.
Oh, absolutely. Remember, the study area was known for its cement industry.
Right, right. Cement. So what's the connection to radiation?
Well, making cement can actually involve materials that have those naturally occurring radioactive elements.
Oh, I see. So could that be why they found higher levels indoors in those houses? Because of the nearby cement industry?
It's definitely possible. The study suggests that it's kind of a two-pronged thing. Both the building materials and the local industrial activity might be contributing to those higher levels.
Wow, so it's like a double dose of potential radiation sources.
Mm.
Okay, but they also talked about geology, right?
Mm.
How does the ground beneath the buildings factor into all of this?
Right. Well, remember how different rocks and soils have different levels of natural radioactivity?
Yeah, we talked about that earlier.
Well, the geological features of a region can also influence those levels.
So even if my building materials are fine, the ground itself could be a source of radiation.
Precisely. And India has incredibly diverse geology, from the Himalayas to the coasts, so many different rock formations, all with their own unique levels of natural radioactivity.
It's like this giant puzzle, isn't it? We've got building materials, industrial activity, and even the ground itself, all potentially contributing to radiation levels.
Exactly. It's a complex picture. And that's why we need more research, more studies in different parts of India to really understand how all these factors interact.
So it's not enough to just look at one industrial area. We need to understand the whole country, right?
Exactly. We need a comprehensive map of radiation levels in India. And that map needs to account for the environment, the culture, the different regions, you name it.
This is also fascinating, but it also makes me wonder about the health implications. I mean, if there's all this variation in radiation levels, does that mean there's also variation in risk?
That's a crucial question. And honestly, it's one scientists are still trying to figure out. Remember, even low levels of radiation can have some biological effects. But the long-term consequences, we're still studying those.
So it's not like immediate danger, but more about potential risks that could build up over time.
Exactly. And it gets even more complicated because it's not just about how much radiation you're exposed to, it's also about your individual sensitivity. Your genetics, your lifestyle, all sorts of things play a role.
So we can't just say this much radiation equals this much risk.
Right. It's about the interplay of all these factors. That's why personalized medicine is becoming more and more important.
Personalized medicine. How does that fit in?
Well, we need to move beyond just general risk assessments. We need to look at how each individual might respond to environmental stuff, including radiation.
Okay, I see. So it's about tailoring healthcare to each person's specific needs and sensitivities.
Exactly. Now, this has all been super interesting, but I know what you're thinking. What can we actually do about all of this?
That's exactly what I was thinking. What steps can we take, especially in India, to minimize our exposure?
Well, that's a perfect segue into the last part of our deep dive. Let's wrap things up by exploring some solutions and what the future might hold for understanding radiation in India.
Okay, so we've been talking about all this radiation around us. It's fascinating, but I have to admit, it's a bit unsettling too. So where do we go from here? What can we actually do to minimize our exposure?
Well, I think the first step is awareness, right? Knowing that this is something we need to consider.
Right, because most people probably don't even think about radiation in their daily lives.
Exactly. But once you're aware, you can start making informed choices. Like, let's say you're building a new house.
Okay, I'm building a house.
You can actually choose materials that are known to have lower levels of those naturally occurring radioactive elements.
So like choosing one type of granite countertop over another, or picking specific bricks.
Exactly. It's all about making informed decisions. And that's where more research comes in. We need to make information about the radioactivity of these materials easily accessible to everyone.
Right, because most people aren't walking around with Geiger counters when they're shopping for building supplies.
Exactly. Public awareness campaigns could really help. Clear labeling, guidelines, things like that.
So people can make informed choices about the materials they use in their homes.
Right. And it's not just about individual choices either. There's a role for building codes and regulations too.
Oh, right, like setting standards for radiation levels in new constructions.
Exactly. So we need a multi-pronged approach here. Educating individuals, empowering them to make good choices, and implementing some sensible regulations at a larger scale.
Okay, so education, informed choices, and regulations. Got it. But what about the research side of things? Where do we go from here with that?
Well, this study we talked about, it's a great starting point, but we need way more research, especially in India. We need studies that look at different regions, different building styles, different industries.
Right, to really get a comprehensive understanding of radiation levels across the whole country.
Exactly. And we need to factor in all those variables we talked about, the building materials, the industrial activities, the geology, even cultural practices. It's a big job.
It is, but it's also super important. This whole conversation has really highlighted how we can't just apply global averages to a country as diverse as India.
Absolutely. We need to understand the local context, the unique factors at play in each region.
And it's not just about minimizing risks either, right?
No, not at all. Understanding radiation has implications for other fields too. Think about archaeology, geology, even climate
Oh,
science.
wow. So it's not just about health, it's about understanding the world around us in
Right.
a deeper way.
Exactly. Radiation can actually be a powerful tool for understanding the history of our planet, the movement of materials, and even the impact of human activity on the environment.
It's like radiation is this hidden language that can tell us all sorts of stories if we
Yeah.
know how to listen.
I like that. It's about seeing radiation not as this scary, dangerous thing, but as a phenomenon that can teach us valuable
Yeah,
lessons.
it's about shifting our perspective.
Yeah,
This deep dive has definitely done that for me. I've gone from feeling anxious to feeling, well, kind of empowered. Like now I know what to look for, what questions to
that's
ask.
what it's all about. Knowledge is power, right? And the more we understand about radiation, especially in the Indian context, the better equipped we are to create a safer, healthier, and more sustainable future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And to our listeners, keep exploring this fascinating topic. Keep asking questions, keep learning.
Yeah, don't be afraid to dig deeper. Every deep dive is just a starting point.
Exactly. The world is full of incredible things waiting to be discovered, so stay
Mm.
curious out there.